For sure, and each and every Thursday we get an opportunity to kind of see where we are with the NBA, specifically from the Athletics. Sam Amick joining us here. We always love checking in with Sam. Sam, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, guys. I'm doing fine. I got my coffee, always a good thing. And I tell you, hearing you guys kind of break down and Dave the curve and where we're at, we need more of this. It is crazy, and I'm not even being glib, that the longer we do this, y'all are one of the highlights of the week. So appreciate you, but we're hanging in there.
Wow. So what I take from that is that before this all happened,
you weren't the highlights.
You weren't really looking forward to this.
You were a highlight only, except when, and you know this, Dave, except when I was on the road, where I typically go to bed a little later than I do at home. And then I would say, oh, good God, I went to bed at 2:30, and now we're up talking to the crew.
Which you love.
I do.
Yeah.
I do. No, I mean, I hope you guys are hanging in.
We are.
Dave, I haven't given you a hard time about the rats in a while. Did you get that under control?
Well, again, because we talked about it earlier briefly, and we hadn't talked about it in a couple of days, it's the old baseball player in me. I don't want to jinx anything. Let me just say, haven't seen anything, haven't smelled anything, but it may just be that he's taken a break or he has moved in somewhere and is living off his pile of whatever rats eats. But so far, so good. I see that. Since we are Facebook and Instagram friends, you and I are visiting the same barber, which is good to go. Are we all doing can we start like a beard thing or something if we haven't already? Like, I feel like coming out of this, we're all.
Man, I gave in. I gave in by the public announcement. I shaved my face. Your wife gives you a hard time enough days in a row and tells you that you're not getting a kiss until you shave. Then next thing you know, you're shaving. But yeah, the hair is out of control. Shameless athletic plug. I actually was just reading a super entertaining story from Marcus Thompson about the impact on barbers who typically serve as pro athletes, and like some fascinating color in there about how they got to be safe, and they've obviously shut it down, and you got all these athletes who are normally just as pristine as anybody when it comes to the do, getting along like us, and those of us who have a few years on most of these athletes, you got the gray weeds coming out, which I don't need to see. So yeah, it's rough out here.
Well, Jason, unless you're De'Aaron Fox, though, right? You've seen that, Jason. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that.
Looks like he's 10.
He took like 4 or 5 years off his look.
Yeah.
That was incredible.
Well, if we jump into like a timeline of things, Sam, we kind of check in on that each and every week with you because we're none of us know, but the last things at least we could say that is coming out of the league, we heard earlier in the week that Adam Silver's like, you know what, let's take a beat here. Let's wait. Let's get through April before we make any kind of decisions. And then following that, I think we've heard the league would like some sort of end date to whatever form of this year's season, if it does come back, would be by Labor Day. So that's a gap in there, but with no certainty of a return. Where do you think we are now this week on a possible NBA return compared to where we were last week?
I feel like it's status quo, and it's not to say that there's not still substantive discussions that are happening all the time at the league office, but I don't feel any closer to thinking that we're going to have a year, especially, listen, it is, for now, good news that there's some positivity on the West Coast as far as the curve. New York's obviously just getting ravaged. And so with that, for me, not to recycle our previous conversation at all, but I still am getting hung up on the testing component. When we talked to Garrett Temple, former King, now on the Brooklyn Nets for an interview about 10 days ago, he had talked about the exploration of a 45-minute coronavirus test, which at the time, I for obvious reasons, I had a hard time processing because that's just not A, available to the public, or B, kind of widely known. But that is, those are key. So it's like, all right, if they can get their hands on enough of those to test the players and be able to say, they're healthy, and then create a bubble society city where you have the rest of the season, then maybe you give it a shot. But, even if you get those tests, you have to be doing that every day, unless you get the antibody test, which is even tougher to get your hands on. Or they don't even have to this point, I don't believe. So there's just so many hurdles. But I don't blame them for trying. I think, I don't know. I mean, you saw the headlines yesterday. There was some chatter coming out of the Bay from a Santa Clara County official about how he didn't expect to see sports until Thanksgiving at the earliest. So a lot of different viewpoints here.
Sam Amick of The Athletic joining us right now. Sam and Jason, you'll feel the same way. Jay, I think we all do. We all get asked by everybody in any interview or any conversation we have with people we don't work with, when do you think things are going to start back up? And I think we all kind of share a similar feeling, which is, I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I have no idea. I'm going to answer the question, but I have no effing clue because I don't know what I'm talking about. Yeah, well, we all go through it, and you want to answer a question, but in the back of your mind, and Sam, we went over this earlier. I keep coming up with the same thought, which is, I just, Bill Plaschke, I don't know if you read his article yesterday in the Times. I thought he said it fairly well. It's depressing to think about. Unless there's a miracle, though, some sort of vaccine, some sort of the virus died off, had a 4-month window and is gone. Barring some miracle, I don't know how you do sports this year. And by this year, I mean 2020. I just, the more and more I think about it, you talked about the testing. I read the same thing, but. Okay, so are you going to be, how's that going to go over giving that type of testing and making that available to athletes when there's people in Detroit or Florida or Georgia or wherever that aren't getting that testing? The amount of infrastructure required to put on a sporting event, whether it's with or without fans, to me, it doesn't seem unlikely. It seems damn near impossible that we're going to have any of that until we have some sort of workable vaccine, or at least something to make this thing chronic and not as deadly. I don't know if I'm off. I don't know if I'm trying not to be pessimistic. I know that's not the news we want to share with everybody, but as much as I think you, me, and Jason and everyone associated with sports as a job would want to say sports is essential, it's not. It's essential to mental health. It's essential to entertainment, but it's not essential. And I wonder where on the train of things that are important sports lies. I got to think it's near the caboose.
Well, I mean, the only angle you could take as far as its value, obviously, is it's the same concept that exists in normal times, where it's a distraction from regular life. And so, the other day I tweeted out an interview I had with Matisse Thybulle from the Sixers, where he had some, a pretty mature perspective, where he said that, there's a lot of essential workers who need to be the priority first and foremost. A lot of people who can't work now, and that sports is not the thing, and even entertainment is not the thing right now. And some of the people in the kind of responding on Twitter disagreed, which is fine, and said, I'm not going to lie, I need some entertainment right now. And it's like, all right, fine, I get it. But A, to do it while keeping the players safe and their families seems, like you said, damn near impossible. And then B, the optics. I mean, we thought about looking into this as a story at our place, like just across all the sports leagues, like, that question that's front and center right now of who's going to jump first. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, which sports league, potentially one of these leagues could maybe be a little too thirsty, jump too early, go down in the history books, as being on the wrong side of history. You know what I mean? And then God forbid, jumps too early and then has a little, an outbreak within their league. That's the stuff that the leagues need to be careful of right now. But, especially when they all get on a conference call with the president and they're all having, this same discussion where it's, how can we get back to business? There's going to be temptation there. There's going to be pressure there. And not only that, there are a ton of people, obviously, who exist or whose livelihoods exist through the league, myself included, in part. But still, I'm with you. I'm having a very, very, very hard time seeing it at least in the next couple of months.
Yeah, and I want to go off that last part of your answer, Sam, because I think that's really interesting. That's going to be where the president and government officials are in that fine line right now of safety and financing, like trying to get the economy going. Sure, it's important to the well-being of communities, but safety probably is the top priority. But how do you find that balance? Well, if we then translate that to the NBA, those same discussions for very wealthy people, but Dave and I played a clip earlier in the week of C.J. McCollum saying, yeah, he believes maybe even as many as 150 NBA players are living paycheck to paycheck. Now, I know it's a larger scale than all of us make, but the financial discussion versus the safety discussion, if we parcel it down to just the NBA, I wonder where those pressures are going to be in some of those conversations from the players, from owners to Silver, on that safety versus finance kind of argument.
No, for sure. And, it's a very, very, very small sample size, but so far in my conversations with players, I would probably say that they've been on the side of caution and on the side of it's fine if we lose the season. It's not ideal. Joe Ingles is another guy we talked to from the Jazz. Now, again, that Garrett Temple conversation, which matters a little more in terms of handicapping this thing because Garrett is one of the vice presidents for the Players Union. He sounded like someone whose mind was, he was wanting to be safe, but whose mind was really deep in, how can we do this? How can we pull it off? I think also, and I'm going to do this today, I wanted to go and really study everything that LeBron James had said in his press conference. He did a conference call with reporters yesterday, local reporters. And, that to me is a significant voice, obviously, where what LeBron says is going to matter. He was negative previously on the concept of playing without any fans, and that puts the league in a tough spot right away because obviously that's the only way this is happening. And so, is he on board with a bubble city idea, or is he, as a family guy who has plenty of money, saying, he doesn't want to lose another couple months at the stage, this stage of his career. But I think, bottom line, LeBron's voice is going to matter. Players like that. And the stuff that would be fascinating to know is, just hacking Adam Silver's phone and seeing, who's calling, who's texting, what are the messages like, because he is so available to his players, to the agents, to executives, that he's the guy who is obviously fielding all of these different viewpoints right now.
Sam Amick of The Athletic with us. Sam, if you know the answer to this question, I'm going in asking you a question that I would be shocked if you knew the answer, but I am curious if you get a chance, you have better connections than any of us over the next few days. I'd be very curious to know, let's just, for the sake of it, assume that at some point the NBA says, listen, we've had to cancel the rest of the season, or at the very least, we're going directly to playoffs. If anything, we're canceling the rest of the regular season. There are in addition to just wanting to know, there are a lot of contract variables that go into postseason awards. So I'm very curious as to what the what the trigger mechanism is for those awards to be awarded, how that's going to work, and really, are they basically, let's say they canceled the season today. Now tomorrow, do ballots go out and everybody just votes, I would assume, on to date what has happened? So your MVPs based on whatever games were played, et cetera, et cetera. I am curious if the mechanism of awarding MVP, Rookie of the Year, et cetera, is going to be the same as if we had a lockout starting at Game 62.
Yeah, from my corner, and I have pretty frequent contact with different people from the league, and then also as part of the Pro Basketball Writers Association board. So I've had zero discussions with the league about that. It's not been on my radar, has not been brought to us that I'm aware of. I would assume that it would happen in pretty quick order once that decision was made. They send out it's just a computer link where you have drop down menus and go ahead and make your picks. I don't think it would be any more complicated than that. I mean, I have no reason to believe that they would, I guess technically it's possible that they would say, it's not an entire season, so we're not going to do it. I think, for one, from a from a kind of interest standpoint, I mean, that's going to be a week, if not more, of, talk radio, TV discussion. You can have the NBA in the news again. You can at least honor the season that was and the one that is not going to be finished in that scenario. But, yeah, I mean, I don't know how you guys feel. I mean, I do think they probably would need to do awards. You've had, the season was near its end, and it was at that stage where I think for a lot of these different awards, they were unofficially already going to certain individuals. And so, I think they should do it. I just don't know how that would look.
Sam, we saw a couple of stories during the week where I believe it was the Utah Jazz have done some cutting to their payroll overall with some officials there, and some people are furloughs. And then the Lakers, apparently, some of their top brass took some pay cuts at the top, maybe some of the league, Laker higher-up officials there. I know it's probably a team-by-team basis here, but how much of that, if in fact the season does get postponed or canceled, I should say, do you think will happen from team to team?
Great sense of all 30 owners' books in terms of how, I mean, you got to know more about their revenue streams, right? Like the thing that, to use the Jazz example as kind of informative, they typically are considered, now it's Gail Miller, the wife of the widow of the late Larry Miller, who's running it, and they typically are considered one of the better ownership groups in the country from a class standpoint, from a treatment of employees standpoint, all of those things. Well, the tough thing for them is that they butter their bread with car dealerships and movie theaters. And those have obviously taken a major hit. And so, those layoffs hit them hard. I talked to some people with their organization, and it was emotional. I mean, they just, that's hard stuff. And so Tillman Fertitta comes to mind with Houston. Now, already kind of a guy who's been accused of being quote unquote cheap for a while, which is obviously a relative term, but Tillman traffics in restaurants and casinos. And so he's taken a huge hit, and, that's going to have a ripple effect. I don't know if you guys have any examples that come to mind of like, if you had to be an owner in this situation, who's got it best of all in terms of where their money comes from. But obviously, some of these owners are going to be in better spots than others.
I mean, truly, it's an interesting question, Sam. I would think, Warriors, Kings, Grizzlies, Mavericks. I'm just running through. I'm trying to think of your tech-based ownership groups, and that's not it's not 100%, but to your point, it's something I hadn't thought of. But your ownership groups where their money is based heavily in car sales, movies, things that are being shut down, it's very difficult to think of it like when you see the valuations of these teams, when you see what players are making. In fact, we were talking about it yesterday. I said the per diem for 30 days for an NBA player is about $40,000 a year if you extrapolate it out. So it's tough to see some of these jobs cut. But again, as you just said, the longer we go through this, so far I think most teams have been very good with this. But the longer we go through this, yeah, you're going to see some pretty heavy cuts, I would imagine, at the levels that you least want to see the cuts with the ham and eggers, the check-to-checker type of people.
Also, there's like the Kings have, I believe, more minority owners than anybody in the league, and so that's another layer of this thing is that what's going on with all these different teams with their minority owners from a cash standpoint, because there are you have the Tillman Fertittas and teams like that where that's the Sea Bombers where it's essentially one owner for the entire team, and you have a bunch of other teams where the actual cash flow, you might have the face of it might be one individual as the governor of that organization, but it matters what's going on beneath the surface, in kind of the pocketbooks of all those minority owners as well. So it's hard to have any clarity at all, but I definitely agree that unfortunately, the longer this goes on, it's going to be tougher and tougher, and that's where I don't know how that how you interweave that with the discussion about players and pay. You know what I mean? Like, obviously, the bigger sacrifice players can make, the easier it's going to be on the quote unquote everyman beneath them. But tough stuff.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, Sam, we always appreciate your insight. Stay safe. Stay well to you and the family as well. And we'll talk to you again next week.
You guys too. Thanks, boys.